What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another JUICEREACTS video. In today's video, I am checking out this video called Why is Warhammer So Popular? Because it is something that I asked at first when I started getting into Warhammer, and I believe it also deals with just kind of everything that deals with Warhammer, or at least I think it does. It does show the miniatures, which I've been asking you guys. I'm interested on how that game is played and how people talk about it. So I figured, why not just, this randomly came across my browser because I have so much Warhammer 40k in my browser now. So I was like, you know what, this seems interesting, I want to check it out, and maybe some other general audience people want to know why Warhammer is so popular too. So I feel all you hardcore Warhammer fans will let me know if this video was good or not, but we're going to go ahead and check it out right now.
Over the course of almost 40 years, Warhammer has grown from an obscure tabletop and role-playing game into arguably one of the most popular fantasy and sci-fi franchises in the world.
Huge costumes.
Hi there, I'm Guy from Midwinter Minis, and in this video I'm not going to try and convince you that Warhammer is popular. The evidence is everywhere. Record sales, huge and growing communities, mainstream crossovers, and soaring share prices. Rather, I'm going to try and explain why. Why is Warhammer so popular?
I forgot I saw
that.
Like
with all great success stories, there really isn't just one simple answer. And in fact, it's entirely because Warhammer ticks so many boxes for so many people, it's quite hard to summarize with a simple response. I've given this topic a lot of thought recently, and for what it's worth as a Warhammer fan of 20 or so years, here's what I think. First off, we need to talk about the tabletop games. From its sword and sorcery beginnings in the early 80s, Warhammer has grown and evolved into a multifaceted collection of games in both fantasy and sci-fi settings. Warhammer 40,000 and Age of Sigmar, the two main branches of the Warhammer franchise, are both fully realised, constantly evolving and, dare I say it, fun tabletop games. Even though both can be enjoyed casually in relaxed games with friends and probably over some pizza, there's also a bustling competitive side to the games too, with hundreds and hundreds of unique regional tournaments all around the world.
How long does a game take?
Okay, you're thinking, so it's a game. So what? There are loads of other games. Why is Warhammer growing so fast?
Risk.
And you'd be absolutely right. The world isn't short of board games, and war games have been played for literally thousands of years. But behind Warhammer's popular tabletop experience, there is a far deeper and richer hobby universe waiting to be explored. Now, that's all well and good, but how would you actually find out about the hobby in the first place? A nerdy game with little models seems quite niche, right? Well, with its steady rise in popularity, Warhammer has escaped the tabletop and crossed over into traditionally mainstream media. And I'm not just talking about the occasional references in South Park, Rick and Morty, or Sex Education. One of the most common ways for people to discover the world of Warhammer is through video games. Dawn of War, Blood Bowl, Space Marine, Deathwing, Regicide, Mechanicus, and the Total War series have pushed Warhammer beyond the boundaries of the tabletop and given a whole new audience a taste of the setting, style, and characters of the franchise. Now, speaking of video game crossovers, this is probably the perfect time to bring up the sponsor of this video. World of Warships is back to the matter at hand. Let's talk about the lore. L-O-R-E, not L-A-W. Sorry, they sound the same in my accent. Warhammer features one of the most fleshed out fictional universes of any franchise.
So I've seen this map
Believe it or not, there have been almost 1,000 books written in and about the Warhammer setting, and in tons of different genres.
Are those kids' books?
Aside from the obvious war stories, there's murder mysteries, horror, fantasy adventures, dramas, tragedies, and even children's novels, all of which add a fascinating depth to the setting. Warhammer also has a totally unique visual identity, owed in no small part to the conceptual work of Jez Goodwin and John Blanche. While these Games Workshop veterans have very different styles, the amalgamation of their work has created the grimdark aesthetic that Warhammer has become synonymous with. Even the word grimdark has its own lexico entry now. Talk about mainstream.
That's cool.
While Warhammer wears many of its influences on its sleeve, particularly Frank Herbert's Dune, which set the blueprint for modern sci-fi, the visual style and concepts of Warhammer are a real melting pot of cultural touchstones. Tolkien, Aliens, Starship Troopers, Lovecraft, Mad Max, Judge Dredd, Hammer Horror, Speedball, Blade Runner, Robocop, and Norse mythology. Whatever you find entertaining, Warhammer probably has something for you. And this stuff isn't just spoken about in the books. You can bring it all to life on the tabletop with games set in all of these different places, featuring thousands of unique models and characters. While Warhammer 40k focuses on large-scale sci-fi warfare, games like Necromunda happen in the same universe, but focus on gang wars in dystopian hive cities. And games like Space Hulk, Blackstone Fortress, and Space Crusade are narrative-driven dungeon crawlers. If you're more a fan of Lord of the Rings than Star Wars, Age of Sigmar, formerly known as Warhammer Fantasy, will be right up your street. Again, the main game focuses on all-out war, but if you prefer skirmish battles, Warcry will satisfy your sword and sorcery bloodlust, and if you prefer more traditional board games, Silver Tower and the classic Hero Quest certainly tick those boxes.
This is crazy.
There's even a turn-based version of American football where orcs and tree men can smash heads with elves and demons.
That's cool.
This unparalleled depth and diversity, coupled with its unique style and gritty setting, make Warhammer the perfect franchise for those who find Star Trek too sterile, Dungeons and Dragons too tame, or Star Wars too stale. Now I could go on and on and on, but let's leave the story side of Warhammer there for now, and talk about what for me is the biggest part of the hobby. The physical hobby itself, and the outlet for creativity that it brings.
I don't know if I could paint
The physical
stuff.
version of the game requires you to
It
build
looks
and
like
paint
shit
your
for
models.
me.
Now for some this may be a bit off-putting, but for many people this outlet for artistic skill, expressive and creative freedom is one of the main draws of Warhammer. Even the simple act of gluing a single model together and getting a few base coats down can give you a real sense of accomplishment.
That's crazy.
And finishing off a squad, or maybe even a whole army over time, can give you a really huge sense of satisfaction. A real, I made this moment. That's something you simply don't get from playing computer games, for example. I mean, I should know, I've finished enough of them, and apart from a secret nerdy spreadsheet where I rank them all and some cool memories, I don't really have anything physical to show of my virtual achievements.
The Sims 3?
Well, apart from maybe a beer belly.
How do you finish The Sims?
The act of painting itself opens up a lot of potential for adding your own creative spin. It's a blank grey canvas, and you get to decide what it will end up looking like. It's also not a hobby that you're expected to hit the ground running in. The awkward first steps can be made a little bit easier by getting tips from friends or following along with simple painting tutorials from people like me or many of the other much better painters out there, and you can improve your skills at your own rate in a nice leisurely way. If you're more interested in building than painting, then making terrain, creating dioramas and customizing models is another rabbit hole that you'll probably love to dive down. As I mentioned, there's a comprehensive background and loads of inspiration to draw from, and there are massive communities dedicated to doing just that.
I love the creative side of this.
And while of course you could do the same thing with model trains or airfix, there are very few ways of really integrating your cool creations into a playable game. On the flip side of that coin, you've got really great games like Magic the Gathering, Catan, or Pandemic, and while, just like Warhammer, regular players of those games might be considered a bit nerdy, there isn't the same physical, painting, making, creative hobby community at the core of them, which may go some way to explaining some of Warhammer's runaway success. While painting can be a great activity to learn and share with friends and family, it also offers some pretty undeniable mental health benefits too. Shutting yourself away, gluing little models together and giving them a lick of paint is a precious dose of you time that a lot of people are really missing out on these days.
That's true.
Indulging in a hobby, even if it's just for a few minutes, is a great way to take a break from your stressful day-to-day, letting you ignore the world for a while and indulge in a little bit of escapism while you build, paint and play. I think one of the things that makes Games Workshop's franchise so appealing for escapism is that it's just so ridiculous and larger than life. It creates a nice distance from reality, more so than historical war games, which a lot of people can find quite depressing or traumatic. There's something addictively silly but strangely awesome about firebrand, genetically engineered space monks blasting giant alien bugs into oblivion, or reanimated skeletal legions and angry lizard men going at it tooth and nail. It's truly a fantasy, and that's one of the reasons people love it so much. Solo hobby time also gives you a great opportunity to catch up on soul food activities like listening to audiobooks, catching up with podcasts, or other things that you perceive to be a productive use of your time, rather than just zoning out in front of the TV for hours again.
I got a Batman podcast.
The solo side of the hobby has proved so successful for Games Workshop that even during the COVID outbreak, the company performed so well it voluntarily paid back the financial stimulus aid it received from the UK government. That's not just great as a solo activity though. Warhammer has what I consider to be one of the most welcoming, inclusive and supportive communities out there. Now, for pretty much all of my adult life, I've been involved in the music industry, either producing for bands, performing in my own, working for music stores or musical instrument companies. I recently made a big career change and made Midwinter Minis my full-time job, and although I'll miss a lot of things about music, unfortunately the community really isn't one of them. Sad to say, I always found it quite elitist, egotistical, and the conversation predominantly negative.
Yeah.
On the other hand, since coming back into the hobby more seriously about 7 years ago, I found the Warhammer community to be welcoming and supportive. Of course, there are exceptions to this rule, and you'll find gatekeeping weirdos in almost every hobby or activity out there, but the vast majority are encouraging, helpful, and positive. Local gaming stores are a great place to meet new friends with similar interests, and there are enormous independent communities throughout Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Another sure sign of the hobby's popularity is the growing number of content creators, myself included, who now make their living by painting, playing with, or talking about, well, toys, really.
Damn.
That's pretty awesome.
Slick hair.
Strange, sure, but awesome. But Guy, you're probably asking, well, maybe not, but it helps me move things along. You said that Warhammer is almost 40 years old. Why wasn't it as popular back then as it is now? Things like Star Wars were popular from day one. And again, you are full of great questions. Essentially, what we're saying here is, why specifically now?
That post
Well,
is
I think
so great.
money certainly has something to do with it. And let's not kid ourselves here, Warhammer is not a cheap hobby, and the kids who had their first experiences of Games Workshop stuff in the 80s and 90s are now full-grown adults, settling down, enjoying careers, and earning more. Now, what are they going to do with all that expendable income? For those people, and I'm definitely including myself in this demographic, Warhammer is a powerful link to the past. A big hit of nostalgia that transports you to those rose-tinted, carefree times. It's also a great way to reconnect with old friends who you maybe shared the hobby with back in the day. The franchise, as well as Games Workshop itself, have changed dramatically over the course of those 4 decades, and although a few of the changes have been, in my opinion, not great, many of them have been superb. The company itself, which used to be a silent, private, mysterious entity, has now opened up and fully embraced its community. The awkward, easily chipped metal models and bubble-ridden fine-cast resin have almost entirely been replaced with incredibly high-quality plastic models, with some of the highest level of detail found in the hobby. The designs have also matured from quirky, sometimes endearingly ugly hand-carved designs to meticulously rendered tiny sculptures.
Damn,
And
that
while
looks
older models
awesome.
and sometimes even full ranges have been updated, you can, by and large, still use any old models that you might have from the 80s or 90s. Apart from squats. Poor old squats.
Oh, what happened to squats?
Now it's a slow process, but Games Workshop are steadily improving the variety of models on offer too. For a long time, the majority of women in Warhammer were demons with their boobs out, nuns with boob armor, or literal sex slaves. And in 2020,
Damn.
people understandably find that pretty problematic. Now, in the interests of cultural and historic relativism, those models were of their time, and their designs were made by men, in a game made and played mostly by men, and attitudes have changed a lot over the last 40 years. And Games Workshop's newer models and Warhammer's growing popularity certainly reflect that change.
That's awesome.
The tabletop games have also changed in that time, becoming more and more focused and streamlined, with compact versions like Kill Team letting you enjoy a game on your lunch break rather than having to dedicate a whole afternoon to your hobby. And while there's been a bit of debate over the overly wordy rules of 9th edition 40k, they still seem like child's play compared to some of the Rogue Trader stuff. I mean, do people want to see a return of vehicle turning rules? These changes have no doubt contributed to Warhammer's popularity and Games Workshop's freight train profits. But you know what they say, the bigger they are, the harder they fall.
So that
Surely
seems
this
confusing.
popularity can't last forever. Is there anything on the horizon that maybe poses a risk to Warhammer's success? I mean, yeah, that's a hypothetical question, there definitely is. Let's talk about a few of them, and see if they pose any real threat. First off, let's talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to the physical side of the hobby. 3D printing. Technology that would have been considered just as sci-fi as the game itself back in the 80s is now an affordable reality to many hobbyists. Entry-level 3D printers cost about the same as an entry-level electric guitar, and it's totally possible to create awesome results with them. So, given that practically anyone could have their own little scale model factory at home now, how are Games Workshop still able to sell models? After all, some of their models are more expensive than a lot of 3D printers. Well, truth be told, even though 3D printing is now very affordable, it's definitely not consumer friendly yet.
Yeah. That's
3D
true.
printing is a hobby in itself, and if you have just enough time to enjoy Warhammer as a hobby, you're going to have to sacrifice that and learn how to calibrate and reliably create successful 3D prints. Plus, they smell a lot. Now, recasting, where either a person or a company makes a mold of an official model, recasts it, and sells it for less money, also poses somewhat of a threat to the sale of physical Warhammer models. And from my own personal experience of recast miniatures, I'd have to say that I just don't feel like it's worth it. The resin is often more difficult to deal with than fine cast, the models often look oddly thin, and even though it's often much cheaper, is half price really worth days of fiddly prep work just to get things looking okay? I mean, obviously that's a personal decision, but for me, no. Another challenge that may hit Games Workshop is the high level of plastic waste intrinsic in their hobby. The company installed a huge solar array on the factory roof recently, generating a significant portion of their power from renewable energy, so being eco-friendly is definitely on their agenda. But what about the plastic in the models and the frames they come attached to? Is it recyclable? It's certainly not very clear, and environmentally conscious consumers may eventually start to push back against the use of non-recycled plastics. Now, for what it's worth, here's what I'd suggest they do. Let people bring their empty sprues into store, or send them off to a local reseller, and then when you turn in a specific amount or a set weight, like 500 grams or something, they give you a terrain tile that's made from heated, recycled, pressed old sprues. It doesn't need to be super detailed or very big, but who would pass up a free thing? Games Workshop, if you're listening, I don't even want royalties if you end up doing this. I just want it to happen for no particular reason. Thanks for sticking with me till the end. I think one of the most fitting ways I could end this video is to quote Rick Priestley, one of the founding fathers of Warhammer and a core writer of the original rules. At the start of the very first Warhammer 40,000 rulebook,
those are all beaky boys.
He says this: "If you've ever left the cinema or turned from your TV screen wishing that you could invent your own Death Stars, Stormtroopers, whirring ornithopters, and wild-eyed heroes, then this is for you. Warhammer 40,000 is the game that lets you create all kinds of exciting, futuristic adventures on a tabletop. You will need a few models, a little scenery, and the odd accessories such as dice and a ruler, but most importantly, you will need a smattering of creative genius. The fact that you're reading this is a sure indication that you are eminently qualified on that score. Thanks for watching. Bye for now."
Huh. Okay. So I'm assuming some of you guys know of this channel. I don't know if you recommend it or not, but yeah, Midwinter Minis, if you want to see more content like that. I will say, just as somebody that loves editing and good voiceover and stuff, that was a fantastic video, and I think it had some good knowledge. Was it the best knowledge? I have no idea, because I'm a noob when it comes to this. But I think, I do find the Warhammer, like, creative side very fascinating. Obviously, I love reacting to the video game trailers and the fan, like, I mean, obviously, the way I got started here was looking at a Star Tease, which was a fan-made freaking project. And I think that's fantastic. But just going into the, see, here's the crazy thing, right? I think, there's other companies that do this, right? Or is it just Warhammer 40k that have these little miniatures? The reason why I ask is because I used to work with a guy that always talked about painting miniatures, but he also wasn't the easiest person to talk to sometimes. And like, I would hear about his miniatures here and there, but I cannot remember if it was Warhammer 40k. But he also did talk about buying like massive tabletop pieces for his stuff, and I think he was probably talking about Warhammer 40k. He moved a long time ago, so I haven't talked to him in a couple years. But yeah, like, it's just a small world that I probably was hearing from this one guy, and now I'm just like watching it as content and stuff. But the hobby seems really amazing. It's just like, I don't know. I collect like collectibles of DC Comics and Batman and Harley Quinn and all these different kind of things. That's what I'm really into. I don't think I am good enough at painting to want to do this. And I also, my thing is too, I don't really know anybody personally that plays Warhammer 40k. And so like, I would just be like, well, how do I play it? Where do I play it? So I don't know if I personally would invest the money. I love the universe. The universe is awesome. But yeah, I don't know. I love that the community is so great. I'm glad that he said that in the video, because I have jumped into other communities. I am a comic book fan, and I can tell you that DC and Marvel have some pretty terrible communities at times, but there are some gems and some really cool people in those communities as well. But for the most part, the Warhammer community has been fantastic, and I really appreciate that. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be today's video. Of course, if you have not checked out the Twitch channel, you should definitely come hang out over there, hit the follow button, turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the times we go live. And of course, if you want some weird content, check out my TikTok, it's right there. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, because 93% of you are not subscribed. Why are you hurting my feelings like that? But anyways, guys, I hope you guys have a great day. I appreciate you watching this channel and supporting it. You guys are awesome. And I'll see you in the next video. And remember, I totally messed up my outro. Remember, when you wake up in the morning, ask yourself something. I'm a daily dose of juice. See you guys next time.